right, so today we're working with the built-in file dialog boxes. So we're going to download this crime.zip file. Let's just take a little overview of the schedule for a minute. So this week, we got the midterm exam. How many of you have taken the midterm exam already? Anyone? A couple of you? What did you think? Was it like totally out of line or about right? Good. Did you have your score yet? Okay, good. Just checking. That midterm ends Saturday. Remember what time's the last test go out on Saturday? 3 o'clock. Yeah, so don't remember it kind of closes early on Saturday.
Which days are late days again?
Late days just Saturday.
Friday's not.
Friday's free all day, if I remember right. I hope so. One time I told people wrong. When they took the test, I had to pay $5 for it. What's that? They didn't, but I paid them all $5. Listen, if you paid $5, you weren't supposed to come to me on due for us. A few people took me up on it. So I still have a stack of $5 bills in my office. I thought it'd be more. Okay. Okay, so then we got the user forms project due. Is that a week from today? It's a week from today. All right. You're probably not thinking about the next project yet because we haven't started the content for you, the database modification. We'll talk for just a minute about what we're going to do with the database modification task. In fact, I'm bringing it up because the stuff we covered today is going to directly apply to that project. So, in fact, these data files that we're downloading, you can go ahead and download that zip file and extract it if you want to work along today. So what this, I have way too many files in my downloads. What these files are is this is the way that the FBI publishes, or at least the way they used to publish, data that was, well, that's not very good. Data that the FBI kept track of with regard to crimes committed on university campuses. And so, you wanted to know how many arsons there were. The University of Central Arkansas for the year 2011, there was one. 2 motor vehicle thefts. It's not a bad way to present the data if you're just kind of curious and you want to know. But if you're going to do some analysis on this data, this is a hideous way for this data to be organized, and this is the way that the FBI published it. And so what that project is going to be is it's going to be, listen, we've got like 48 of these files. You've got to open them, you've got to parse through all this information, and you've got to take that information out and put it into a database, into the right format, so that it could be analyzed. You want to build a pivot table on it based on this data. So that's what we're doing. I'll tell you a little story about how I got this data. It's probably available online, although I've looked lately and haven't found updated stuff yet. But I guess in 2012 or 2013, I was looking for some interesting data to build an assignment on. And I came across a description of this data, but it was like, if you want this data, then send an email to the FBI and we'll send you the data. Did I tell you this? Oh, I told you this story. So this is the data, the long-awaited data that I told you about. They sent me the master copy and asked for it back. Okay. So this is the stuff. So we're downloading that today just because we need kind of a set of files to be able to work with, because we're working with the file dialog. So we get that downloaded, get it extracted, and I'll close that. And then I'm going to open up a brand new workbook. Brand new blank workbook, and we'll start from scratch. And make sure that insert a new module, and we're in good shape. Okay, so we're talking about the dialog boxes, the file dialog boxes that are built into Excel. We're going to work with those, and we're going to see some other ways to work with lists of files. But let's start off with understanding the folder, how we can allow a user to pick a folder. So make a sub-procedure here, and I'm just going to call it the folder picker demo. Folder picker just sounds a little bit weird.
You just started with the Excel file.
Okay, this is a brand new module. Yeah, a brand new empty workbook. Oh, let's go ahead and save this. I want to save this in a particular location relative to that folder of crime workbook for files. We'll do a save as. Now here's where I want to put it. I want to put it in exactly the same location as the folder. Not inside the folder, that folder is in my documents. I want this workbook to go in my documents. So they're sisters. They're at the same level. This for me is in downloads. So I'm going to go to downloads, browse, downloads, and XLSM. I'm going to call it file dialog. Enter 7.
So if I stuck all those in a folder, I don't want it in the folder with it.
Yeah, if you put all those files into some folder, then whatever the name of that folder will save the folder.
The crime.
Crime. You don't want it to be. You don't want the workbook to be in the crime folder. You want the workbook to be in the same folder that the crime folder is in. So if the crime folder is in if the crime folder is in a folder called MBA 614, then you want to be able to see your workbook is there and the crime folder is there, and then all the files are inside that other folder. Your Excel file is not one of the ones that's inside. Wouldn't be the end of the world if you put it inside there, but just if you have the same environment, then you'll know that what I've got will work for you as well. All right. All right. So it turns out that these built-in file dialogues. Well, first of all, they're dialog boxes. What does it mean to be a dialog box? So a dialogue is a conversation, and so when we have a conversation between the program and the user, we do that in what's called a dialog box. I'm going to give the user some information in the dialog box. They might give me some information. It's a dialogue. We're going back and forth. It's called a dialog box because it's usually square or rectangular, like a box. And there it is. It's a file dialog box. Here's how we create it. They're built into Excel. They are part of the Excel application. I'm going to declare a variable to refer to it. I'm going to call it FD, short for file dialog. So dim FD as, now, typically when we've done this before, what's come after has just been one word. It's been like data type, string, integer, long, byte. Or it's been an object, range, or worksheet, or workbook. This one's going to be a little different because we're going to refer to the collection of Office objects. These are common across all the Office applications, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Access, Power Builder, all of them. Power BI. So Office dot file dialog. Office dot file dialog. Okay, so that's going to give me an object variable. Now, let's suppose that a particular Office file dialog is huge. It takes megabytes of memory to be instantiated. It doesn't really, but suppose that it did. How much memory am I allocating with this statement? Am I allocating a lot of memory to be able to hold all of that file dialog, or am I holding just a little tiny bit? Just enough to hold a reference to that object. What do you think? Is it a lot or a little? Let me say it's a lot. It's got to be a lot. It's a whole file dialog for crying out loud. And everybody's going, no, it's a little tiny bit. It's just a little tiny bit. All this is enough memory to record the memory address, the location of where some object is in memory. We haven't created the object. We'll create it here in just a second. So we're just saying, give me a little bit of memory so I can remember where another object is. The next line is going to actually create that object. Set FD equal to application dot file dialog. Now, I got to tell them which kind. There's 4 flavors to choose from: chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and swirl. We have a file picker, a folder picker, one that's just kind of already wired to open something, or one that's wired to save. They figure the most thing you probably want to do is open a workbook or save a workbook, and so they kind of have these two built in for you. I want to work with a folder picker to start. And so that'll just say, okay, we've got different kinds of these dialogues. We want to work with a folder picker. So the thing is about a folder picker is it doesn't even show the files. Is that true? Yeah, I don't even shows the files. All you can see are the folders. Come out here, navigate around, pick a folder. All right. So at this point, we have now this is going to create the object, and this is going to bind our variable onto that object. So now, if we say fd dot, we've got access to all of the properties and methods that are a part of this file dialog object. And what I want to do is I want to show it. There's a method here. There's a method here called show, and that's what I want to do. Right. It takes more to really make this be meaningful, but this is enough to actually get it to display that file dialog. All we're trying to do is have a way for the user to pick a folder. let's give it a shot. I'll run this. F5. That's a big dialog. And so here it is. This is the file dialog. Built in, it just allows me to come here and say, yeah, I want to go somewhere. I don't want to be on the operating system. I want to go to downloads. I want to go into the crime. This is the folder that I want. So this is what we just said to open up. When the user clicks OK, it's going to tell us which folder they've selected, and then we'll see how to actually work with it. But I want to make sure you've got this part working. You have that working OK? All right. Now, it turns out, for a folder, you can only pick one. There's no way to say, I want to pick these 3 folders. No, you're going to pick one folder. But if I were working with files, I could pick multiple files. And I'd be able to know which ones I'm working with. So it's the fact that this thing can pick multiple objects, not all folders, but that this next part's going to make a little bit of sense. So the way that we get after what is selected is through a collection called selected items. So my file dialog object has a property called selected items. It is a collection. I just want to see the first one. So I'll do a debug.print of the first selected item. So now we're going to set up the object, we're going to show it, the user's going to pick something, click OK, and then we're just going to print off what it is that they selected. Click OK. I guess I'll select class notes as my folder. Say OK. There it is, printed. The whole path for class notes. C:\, / users, GL2 downloads class notes. That's the path I select. So far, so good. But we got a problem. What happens if the user selects something and then says, oh, you know what? I didn't mean it. Cancel. Not an error. Invalid procedure call or argument. This is like the 5th error they came up with. And we've been working with this error since the 1970s, presumably. That's the best we can do for the message. Invalid procedure call or argument. What does it mean? What's wrong? How many objects do you think there are in this collection? How many elements in this collection?
0.
There's probably 0. You can ask it. Count, it's a collection, so it's got to have a count property. There's 0. And I'm telling you to print the first one. No can do. I think that should be a subscript out of range. I think that's what that error should be, but anyway. So the problem is if they say cancel, even if they have selected one, when they say cancel, there's nothing in this set of selected items. So what do? We could check to see if the count is greater than 0, but it turns out the show method will return a value itself. So watch this. I'm just going to say if fd.show. Now it's Boolean. It's going to return either true or false. When do you think it returns false? If you press cancel, they're going to return false. If the user presses OK, it'll return true. So remember, for an if-then statement, what I need between the if and the then is something that evaluates it true or false. And this itself will be true or false. The temptation often is to come in here and say if that equals true. But realize this doesn't change how this works at all. This is going to be true or false. And if this is true, if this returns true, then the statement I'm evaluating is true equals true, which is true. If this evaluates the false, it will be false equals true, which is false. Yeah, so if I have a Boolean expression here, putting equals true on this does absolutely nothing. It might make you feel better to read it, but in terms of the way the code executes, well, actually, it does make it take another step to actually make this evaluation. So you can delete that and save yourself almost a nanosecond. It's kind of a joke. Nanoseconds are a really short amount of time. Almost insignificant. Okay, so now what we're going to say is so now, when we say show, if that thing returns true, it means the user pressed OK, then we're going to do this. Otherwise, what do we want to do? Nothing. We only want to do this if the user presses OK. So now we should be in good shape. I'll stop my code, run it again. If I press OK, I get the path printed. Press cancel, nothing happens. So far, so good. Questions? All right, here's what I'd like to do. I would like to take a little in-class exercise, and I would like to have you convert this, or better yet, copy this, and change this into a function that returns the name of the folder that was picked. So instead of folder picker demo, I'm going to name this function get folder name. I'll get you started as string. Okay.
Folder name or the folder path?
Well, folder name. Okay, we can call it path. Get folder path. Yeah, you're right. It's more than just the name. It's not there yet. What I want you to do now is say, okay, I want to change this to be like a function. So instead of just having it print off the name, I want to be able to call this, let the user pick a folder, and then the name will come back, and then we'll be able to work with it. So we will pause the recording. Okay. So this really is ready to go. All I have to do is, instead of printing it, return that value. How do I set the return value? By setting the name of the function equal to what I want it to return. So all the rest of this is the same. Now we have a function that's nice. We can just call this. The user picks a folder, and it prints off whatever folder they've picked. It's kind of a lot of overhead here to have to be able to get to that. But now I've got a function. I can just say, get folder path. By the way, what will this return if the user doesn't pick a folder? Empty string. Yeah. Every function will return the default for its data type unless you tell it to do something else. In this case, if they put cancel, we're never going to hit this line. We'll never tell it what to return. We'll return a 0 and a 3. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to use this function that's going to get a folder path, the name, the path to a folder, and to be able to process a whole set of files that are in that folder. So this is what you're going to have to do for the project. Is you're going to have to iterate through all of these files, open up the first file, read the data off of it, insert it into a database, close that file, get the next one. The code's going to look through it, read the data off, put it to a database, open up the next one, and go through it. So we've got to run through these files one at a time. So let's make a sub-procedure called process files. And we're going to start off by figuring out what path we want to process. We're going to ask the user. So let's declare a variable, dim folder path as a string, folder path equals get folder path. All right. Now we want to anticipate something right here. What are we going to do? What's the problem that could happen right about now? We're getting ready to process the files in the folder the user specified. What's the condition that's going to be a problem for us? If the user canceled. If the user canceled, what's my folder path going to equal at this point?
Empty string.
Empty string. So if folder path equals empty string, then exit sub. The user said cancel. The user said cancel, for crying out loud. Quit it. Get out of here. We're done. But if it didn't say cancel, then we know we've got a path and we're ready to go. That's the nice thing about this is that the folder path will return a valid path. You don't have to let the user type in. Don't let the user type in a path. They'll get it wrong almost every time. But this folder picker, they can't get it. They can choose the wrong path, but they'll choose a valid path. They have to. There's no way to send back an invalid path. Well, yeah, you could probably find a path to a flash drive, and then as soon as you click OK, yank it out or something. But it would have to be something like that. Okay. So now what I'd like to see is what is it going to take for me to run through all the files that are in that path. There's several ways that we can do this. One way is to actually create another object. There's an object called the scripting, I forget what it's called. Anyway, there's a Microsoft object that we can create that has a whole bunch of properties and methods just for dealing with files and iterating across collections of files and whatever. But it turns out there are statements built directly into VBA. I prefer to use those statements because they work equally well on the Mac and the PC. So if you find yourself needing to do something in VBA on the Mac, this approach will work there as well. So let's take a look. To do this, I'm going to need a variable called file name. Could be anything. Could be anything, but I'm going to call it file name. Then we're going to see how is it that we can, ask for a whole set of files. Oh, on my last computer I couldn't show this because it was a university computer and it was all locked down. I couldn't get to the command prompt. Here I can. Okay, so what we're about to see, how many of you have never used the command prompt? There's a bunch of you going, you know what? I don't want to be here. That looks scary. You don't have to be here. I'm just going to give you a look at the history right now. It used to be that this is what computers looked like. That was it. There was no mouse. There was no Windows. You wanted to do something, you had to type it in. You had to know what to type. And one of the things you would learn how to type pretty quickly was, I want to see what's available, what's here. And so you would type in dir, that's short for directory. And it will tell you what files there are in the folder that you're in. So I'm in this folder called crime, I type in dir, and it shows me these are the folders. Well, maybe I only want to see the ones that begin with M. dir, I can put a, what's it called? Wildcard, m star dot star. M star dot star. Any file that starts with an M, has anything before the dot, and then anything at all after the dot. If I only want to see Excel files, dir star dot xl xls star. That'd be xlsm, xlsx, xlx, slxb, xlst, the template. And so we can use these wildcards to say which ones do I want to see. In fact, I don't even have to be in that folder. I could go back to my root folder, and I could say, give me a directory of that whole path. \w star dot star. So this very thing that I did right here, dir, gave it a path with a filter on it. That is exactly the same thing that I'm going to do inside of VBA to ask what files are available here. The reason is because when the basic language was written, that's the only way you could do it. That was it. It's been around since then. Okay, so I'm going to come back in here to VBA, and we're going to follow that same approach. I'm going to say file name equals dir. There's a function built into the language called dir, and I am going to pass it some path. Folder path. Now, that will be the path. I have to put that wildcard on the end as well. So I will concatenate on. Let me go ahead and concatenate it on application dot path separator. That's a long way to say backslash. We say it that way because in the Mac operating system, it's a different character. We're kind of writing this to be application independent. Path separator. Like using the slash and then ampersand in quotes star dot xlsx. I only want the xlsx files. Turns out in the folder I'm after, that's all there are. So now, that's going to give me something. Let me put a breakpoint here. I'll just put a breakpoint in code, stop. I'm going to run it to this point. This should display up the file dialog. Let me pick a folder, and if I pick something, it should put it into file name, and I should be able to, it should put something from that collection of files in that folder into file name. But what it puts is not especially expected. So let's take a look. run this. I'm going to choose downloads. What is it called? Crime? Here it is. Crime. Say OK. And now I should be able to ask what's in file. Alaska.xls. That's it. There's only one. I said I want the directory for everything that any file that has an XLSX after it, and it gave me one. I feel ripped off. There's like 48 of them. I've been chipped. I've been cheated. I've been wrong. I wanted them all. Well, it turns out that it only returns the first one. Here's how we get the second one. A subsequent call to the function, if I don't specify a new path, will get the next file. I'm just going to drag back up to that line, run it again. And now I'll ask what's in file name. It'll give me the next one. So I can hit this line as many times as I want and just keep getting the next file. Until ultimately I get through all the end of them, I get to the very end of the list. What do you think is going to happen when there's no more to get, no more to choose? Yeah, you'd think an error. Fortunately, no error. Other guesses? If you were writing the function that kind of had to work this way, what would you send back to the user to tell them there isn't? There's no more. We're done. It's over. Go home. What would you send back? Just send back an empty string. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. So it's going to keep sending back file names until I get an empty string. So here's the thing. I don't know how many times I'm going to have to ask it to do this. But I'm going to have to ask it until I get an empty string. I feel something. I feel something welling up inside of me. What is it? What kind of loop? It's a do loop, yeah. It could be a do while loop. I'll do a do until loop. I'll say do until file name equals an empty string. And then I will say loop. I better do something inside this so we can see it happening. So let me do a debug.print out of the file name. I'll come back up to the top of my loop, and I'll just do a little F8 stepping through here. California, bottom of the list, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, we're going through. My finger's going to get tired before I get to 48. Too much time. I'll go whole loop at a time. Yeah, fine, there we go. I'll go high, and we should get to the W's before we're done. Washington, is that the last one? No, there's Wyoming. West Virginia. Wisconsin, there's a bunch of W's. Who knew? Wyoming, there we go. Okay, now I'm going to step one at a time. So I've just printed, I wanted to step one first. I just printed Wyoming. Then I set file name equal to dir. So what's file name right now? Wyoming was the last one. So file name is now blank. So now if I keep stepping back up to the top, it checks the condition again and goes, oh yeah, we're done. And we get out. So that's a nice loop. So far, every time we've used the do loop, I think it's been with some kind of counter variable here, isn't it? We're running through data, checking to see if we're manipulating some variable. Here, we're not counting any variable. All we're doing is say, get the next list off that file. And so now we've got this written so that it will run through all those files. Now, what would I do? What would I actually do besides printing them? What does it make sense to do inside this loop? Yeah?
Just one question. Why don't we need to put all the folder path, location, everything again in the file name line? Like file name equals here, nothing inside.
Oh, yeah, this right here. Why is this one blank?
Yeah, why we don't need to?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah. You know, it was the 1970s. There were bell-bottom pants, disco. There were a lot of things that were weird. So let me tell you what the reasoning here is that the first time that I hit dir, I give it the path. And it actually brings back the whole path, the whole set of files, and puts it somewhere. I don't know where it puts it. It's hidden somewhere. But that list is now maintained somewhere. It must be. I mean, I don't know specifically how it's implemented. That list is somewhere. I don't have access to it except one at a time. The way I get the next item off that list, it puts the list somewhere and it gives me back the first one. The way I get to the next one is by a subsequent call to dir without giving it a path. It says, oh yeah, we had a list somewhere. Where's that list? It's around here somewhere. Oh, there it is. And it says, which one was there. It just kind of takes the top one off and sends it back and then gets rid of it so that it's ready for the next one to send out.
So if I had put, it'll give me just the first all the time.
If you put the path in here again, it will return the first one every time. What's that loop called? Endless loop. And it's going to just keep giving you back that file every single time.
Is that what you would use to events?
Yeah, that's what it'd be trying to have 2 events in here to get you out. I have the thing is, I wrote loops for more than a decade before I even knew that 2 events existed. So it doesn't flow off my fingertips. But yeah, it's a good idea to have 2 events in every loop, especially while you're beginning. Yep.
Is there a reason why Alabama doesn't show up?
Is there a reason why Alabama doesn't show up?
It should be the first.
Yes!
Showed up for me.
Why isn't it showing up? It's because me and Alabama didn't get along and I deleted the file. It's just, I didn't realize that I had deleted it. I didn't delete it today. I deleted it sometime ago. I probably deleted it whenever I downloaded this data last time. I was playing with it. Alaska, I don't like Alaska either. It's out of here. Alaska's nice. I mean, we got land of the midnight sun and all. Yeah, you probably do. You probably have Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas. I deleted some and other. But that brings up something very important. So when it comes time to you're actually doing this, you might say, hey, I'm expecting there to be files. I know I'm processing state files. The idea is you're writing code that you could say, oh, we got another batch of files from the FBI, it's trying to process them again, drop them in the folder and run them. But here's the problem. The temptation is just going to be to write your code that says, open the file named Alabama, open the file named Alaska. What's the problem with that? Yeah, next year the guy in the FBI might go, you know what? I'm just going to go with state abbreviations this year. And the names will all be different. It still makes sense, but your code won't work anymore. So that's why you want to say, what files are there? Let's process the files that are there. Okay, actually a couple more things I want to do here. First is, rather than asking the user to pick the folder each time, what we're doing right here, another common approach to this is to say, the way this is going to work is you are going to put those files in a known location. So you don't have to pick where it is, just put them somewhere and I'll know they're there. This is why I wanted the Excel file to be in exactly the same location as that crime folder. Because that lets me do this. Instead of saying folder path equals get folder path, I'll say folder path equals this workbook dot path concatenated with application dot path separator concatenated with crime. So now instead of asking the user, I'm going exactly where that location is. But it's assuming that the workbook is saved in the same location as the crime folder itself. Because I'm saying the path that is, well, the same path of this workbook concatenated with the / character concatenated with crime. That's where it is. If the crime folder gets separated from where this workbook is, this code's going to break. But as long as they're together, that's beautiful. Which way do you like better? Ask the user to pick it, or just go to pick a location? Yeah, if you're the one in control of it, you probably prefer just to go to the location because it's a hassle to have to go pick the folder. Oh, but incidentally, picking that folder, there's something we can do with that. So I'm going to stop this code. One more thing I want to show you on that folder picker. And that is, I can give it a location to start with. So I can say, before I say show, I can set another property of that file dialog. I can say fd dot, and then there is an option here called initial file name. It doesn't make a lot of sense here because it's a folder we're talking about. But we can say initial file name equals, and we can tell it a place to start. So it doesn't start, who knows where it starts. We can start in a particular location. Where am I going to start? This workbook. Dot path. So now, when I run this, it will start at the same location where this workbook is. Give it a shot. I'm going to go ahead and see. I guess I'll just call get folder path directly. Get folder path. And it's now starting at my downloads folder. I'm told that that's where I want it to start. We'll see some more properties that we can change to the file dialog here in just a bit. But that is then us processing that. Oh, the last thing we did was right here, setting the initial file name. I get a little strange because of the folder button. Questions?
You just select copies.
What's that?
Just copying that last bit down.
You want to go lower than this?
Oh, good.
You good?
Oh, did you go lower this?
I can't go lower. That's the end.
Okay.
You want to go back up to what we were last working on?
No, that's perfect.
Oh, good. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. So what we've just seen is one way to look at a folder and say, I want to process all the files that are in the folder. Oh, you haven't actually done anything with them. I do want to do something besides just print. Okay, so let's come back up here to process files. Now, right now, all we're doing is printing them. Ultimately, what I'm going to have, these are workbooks. What I'm going to have to do is open them and then do a bunch of stuff to where I'm going through to figure out what the data are and then close it. So let's see how we would do that. I'm trying to get you a jump start on the stuff that's not really directly database stuff for this project. In case you're wondering, I'm writing the first part of the project solution for you, right here. Something to pay attention to. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say file name equals this. Oh, you know what I want to do? It's not what I want to do. Darn it. I want to abstract this one more level away. I want to create a function. Let's do this. I want to create a function called getFiles. We're going to pass it a path, and it's going to give us back the files that are in that path. Maybe we'll pass it path as a string, and we'll pass it a filter as a string. And we're going to have it return a collection of files. I did this example the way I used to do it. I want to do it a different way. We're still going to have a process files, but I'm going to, in fact, let me do this. Let me just, we should just rename this one, but let me go ahead and copy the guts out of this, cut the guts out of this, and I'm going to put it up here in my function. That was a little confusing. Here's what I did, folks. I just took everything out of that procedure that we wrote, and I put it into a function called getFiles. I'm going to pass this function two values. I'm going to pass it a path to get the files from, and a filter to say what kind of files do I want. Do I want just text files? Do I want just Excel files? What do I want? So instead of just printing these off, what I want to do is I want to add them into a collection, because this function is going to return a collection. This is new for us. So far, the only functions we've written, they return strings or numbers. This one's going to return a whole collection of something. This is a little bigger step for us. Well, we're past halfway through the semester. It's time to make some bigger steps. So I'm going to need here declare some kind of variable that will let me make that collection. Dim files as collection. So I'm passing folder path in, so I'm going to comment out these parts where I'm setting the folder path. It's coming in okay. All right, so now my first thing is going to be set files equal to a new collection. This is a new idea for us as well. Well, the new is the new part. Remember, when I say dim files as collection, all I'm saying here is I'm allocating just enough memory to keep track of an object somewhere. Typically, when I've done that, we did down here, I would just connect this up by saying set that equal to some existing object. But now, this is the collections we've worked with so far have already existed. We've worked with collections of cells, we've worked with collections of worksheets, collections of workbooks, collections of shapes. They're already there. This collection, we've got to make from scratch. Here's how we do it. We're going to bind that object variable that we created onto a new collection. New says, make a new one of these, put it in memory, and return the reference to this variable. So now, we've created a brand new object, and we've hooked up to it so we know how to refer to it. So now files will be able to manipulate anything of that object. Now it's a collection, so it's got like an add method, a remove method, it's got a count method. We can use all of these, right? And in fact, that's what I want to do. Instead of printing it, what I want to say is files.add file. We're going to pass it a path, and we're going to concatenate on the filter. So instead of having this filter here, we'll concatenate on the filter. We send a path and a filter. It's going to send back the file names, but not just the name. We want to build the path into it. We want this collection to have the full path to it. So we'll put here folder path, concatenated with application.pathSeparator. Concatenated with the file name. Before we had just the file name, I want the full path to that file name. Whatever path we passed in, that's going to start. We'll have the backslash, and then the file name. That will load up that collection. All we have to do is return the collection. How do we set the return value for a function? How do we tell that function what to return? We set the name of the function equal to what we want it to return. So typically we would say, if we're returning like a string or something, we would just say name of the function equals whatever we want it to return. Now, in this case, what do we want it to return? We've got a collection of files called files. But this is an object, so what do we have to do over here? Set get files equal to files. We get rid of the keyword stop. I now have a function that I can pass it, a path and a filter, and it will send me back the set of files for that location. Go ahead.
So why are we using this collection instead of just an array of strings?
Oh, why not just send back an array?
With the path.
Yeah, that would work just fine. It turns out the collection is a little easier to work with than the array.
When do you use an array over a collection?
The question is, when we use an array over a collection? The answer is collections are always one-dimensional. So if I've got something that's kind of naturally two-dimensional, array makes more sense. Now I can put collections inside a collection, so I could have a collection, and each element in the collection could be another collection, so it could kind of feel like two dimensions. But and we use arrays when arrays are what's kind of built in, and we have to use it because that's what's there. Like the list property of a list box. Okay, so now let's come back to process files, which has been gutted. I may copy these comments out and take them over there because that's where they're going to belong. So back to process files. I'll go ahead and declare a variable here called folder path. Rearrange these lines, please. I'm going to leave these first two commented out. This is how these should be. We're going to say folder path, get folder. This is where we're asking the user to supply it. If that's blank, we want to get out of there. We've got those commented out. This is the one we're going to leave in place. Folder path equals that path. We're just going directly to that path. And now, if we want to process those files, I'm going to have a collection variable that I can hook up to that collection that's coming back. So dim, I'll call them data files as a collection. We'll set the folder path, and now I will say set data files equal to what was it called? Get files. I'm going to pass it the folder path, and I'm going to pass it a filter. Star.xlsx. That procedure will then take the path and the filter, get the set of files that I've asked for, send back that collection, and I will bind onto that collection with this new variable. Now I've got my data file. All those files are sitting right here in data files. I've got a control variable. I should be able to make a loop that goes through it. For x equals 1 to datafiles.count. Next, debug.print x, comma, datafiles sub x. I've done everything right. That should just spin off a list of state file names. Folder path as string. Get rid of the sorry, I've got in my get folders, I had this variable declared. I've got to get rid of that. Here I'm saying get files. Folder path is declared here. It can't also be declared here. That's what this area is. I've got to get rid of this declaration. So let's access the. We wouldn't run that again so we can see it right. Process files, and we go. I've got only 46 because I've deleted a couple of those files. All down my list.
So please scroll down again.
Yep, I went to that kind of quicker. Which one are we on? Process files?
Yeah.
So the magical things here is that this function that we created called getFiles returns a collection. So all we have to do to receive it, have a collection variable, and then say set that variable equal to whatever this function returns. Now I've got a local collection inside this procedure. It's got all those files in it. Yeah?
Sorry, could you talk just a little bit about what a collection is?
So yeah, what is a collection? So a collection is an object. It's got a set of properties and methods.
Yeah.
One of the methods it has is called add. Where is it? It's called add. So when I say that collection.add and I give it something to add, it puts a reference to that thing into the collection. And so it's a set of things that can just keep on growing. It's got methods like count, tells me how, or a property called count, tells me how many there are. It's got a method like remove, I think it's called. Let's take items out of it. And so it really is kind of like an array that's meant to have things put into it one at a time and keep track of it. We talked about dynamic arrays and how it's really inefficient to add things to a dynamic array one at a time. Collections they're meant for it. They're wired for it. They work very quickly. Questions?
In arrays, we can just like put the same thing ever and ever, like strings and integers and those kind of stuff.
They have to be the same, yeah.
They need to be the same.
For an array, all your elements have to be the same data type. For a collection, they don't. You can put any arbitrary, you can put a collection that says, you know what, I've got a worksheet in the first element, I've got a string in the next element, I've got a reference to a cell in the next element. Anything you want to into a collection, they don't have to be similar. Yes?
Is that useful?
Is it useful? Oh, to put different kinds of things? One thing that might be useful here, kind of a reason why I might do that in this context, is what I might do is I might say, okay, I want you to go look at this folder, and what I want you to bring back is, the very first thing I want you to bring back is another collection. Inside the collection, give me another collection that has references to all of the folders that are there, and then give me all the files. So I can know the first thing is a collection that's got other folders, and then everything else is the files that are in it. So I could use that and say, you know what, I want kind of a larger set of things. So yeah, you can make kind of really complex whole collections using that collection. It can be really helpful. It's more than you want to really think about on the first day you've been exposed to it. Let's take a look at actually processing a file here. So instead of just doing debug.print, let's do this. Oh, I lost you. Something you just said. Sorry about that. So we've got the video, so you can go back and slow it down. Okay. So here's my process files. What am I doing here? I'm getting a path. I'm using that path to get a collection of files, and then I'm running through those files. It makes this pretty simple. What I'm going to do is I want to open each one of those workbooks. That's what I got to do for the project. I got to open the workbook. I got to do some stuff to it, then I got to close the workbook. So I could open that workbook just by saying workbooks dot open, and then I give it the path. Remember, my data files is the collection that has all the files that came back from my get files function. And so one of those is going to be the whole path to a file. I can do this, workbooks.open, and then just give it that path and it will open that workbook. Be careful, because if I ran this right now, it would open up, for me, 46 different workbooks. Unless I ran out of memory. Fortunately, on this computer, I wouldn't run out of memory, but it's all going to be open. So I want to close it. I'm going to open it, I'm going to do some stuff with it, and then I want to close it. So, if I know I've only got one Excel workbook open, then the workbook that's already open will be number 1 in the collection. I can close number 2. In fact, students, I always have a few students that do this. They get their solution to the database assignment working beautifully. They go to grade it, and then the grader won't work at all. Because they're opening it and they're doing this. They're saying like this: workbooks 2.close. Why wouldn't this work once you're trying to have this thing graded? Because the grader is a workbook. And so when you say workbooks 2.close, what are you closing? You're closing the grader. Your other one stays up, the grader's closed, and the grader quits doing anything, you just closed it. And like you email me, my code works beautifully, your grader sucks. Well, you know, the grader kind of has to be open for you to be able to work, for it to work. You know, there are some drawbacks, some limitations. It has to be open. You can't close it. So here's a better way to do this. Instead of just saying open and then close, you know, maybe you can remember the name and close it by its name, that would be a little safer. But here's an even better way. Let me dim WB as a workbook. It's just a reference, it's a object variable that can refer to a workbook. And then the open method returns a reference to the workbook that it just opened. So I can say set WB equal to this workbook that gets opened. Now, I'm doing something with the return value, so I've got to put parentheses around the argument list. So now I can say, I now have a handle to the workbook that's getting opened right here. So what do I say to close it here? Just say WB.close. If I wanted to refer to a particular part of that workbook, I could say WB.sheet1. .cells, whatever, I could go into it. Doesn't matter which one's active, I have direct handles to go to the ones that I want. So if I ran this now, we'll probably see those things flash open and closed. But one more thing I'm going to put here. It's okay, like, while you're working on this database project, it might make your life easier if you change some of the data on the sheet. I want to move all these cells over by one. You'll see why you might want to do that when you get the project. That's okay to do, but just make sure when you close it, you don't save it. So save changes is the first argument here. You put a false there, and it will close without saving. I think we'll see those open. Should be able to do it in less than a minute. You can scroll where you can see the names. No, not open long enough to see the name. It's not doing a whole lot with them, it's just opening them and closing them. I thought it would open and close faster than it is, but it's supposed to be a fast computer. i7, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes of RAM. What's that?
I said, what do you need 32 gigs of RAM?
Yeah, I think I only have 60 on this computer. My desktop has 32, and if you go to 64, I'm just itching to put 64 in it just for bragging rights. Okay. Virtualization. The answer is virtualization. So if I were doing the database project, I'd have it set up just like this, and then I'd probably put a call to a function, another sub-procedure here that actually does the work on one file. This is all the part that kind of gets that file open and ready to be processed. Kind of a good place to remember. Okay, one more thing I want to do in the next 10 minutes. And that is, what we've just seen is we've seen a way to work through a set of files, to process through a set of files. What we're saying is go to a folder and send me back all the files that are of a particular wildcard, and I want to work through them. I want to show a different way to do it, again with the file dialog box. So I'm going to create a process files 2, very top, another sub procedure. Sub process files 2. More along the lines of our file dialogs. Dim fd as office dot file dialog. Set fd equal to application dot file dialog. Now this time, instead of the folder picker, I want the file picker. Folder picker just lets me pick a folder, this lets me pick a file. This open and save as, did I already tell you about these? These specifically say, you know what? I bet most of the time when you're doing this, you want to open an Excel file. And so it just kind of gives you one that's totally wired for them. You know, you might want to do a save as. That's a really common thing. We'll give you one that's wired for them. But just to pick a file arbitrarily, we'll use the file. And again, down here, we're going to say if fd.show, then we'll do something. That means the user pick at least one file. But now, before we show it, I want to configure a few things. Here's the first thing I want to configure. I want to say, let the user pick multiple files. So, fd.allow multi-select equals true. It's the first property. Now, this file dialog will let the user pick several files right at a time. It doesn't have to meet a particular pattern. The user can just go, yeah, I want this one, and this one, and this one, and these three. And it doesn't have to fit any pattern. Just let the user pick it. So that's kind of a different way to do it. That's fine. Now you'll see why this needs to be a collection. So I'm going to declare another variable up here, dim x as an integer. Inside my if statement here, to make a loop, where x equals 1, 2, fd.selected items dot count. Right? Now it's the same thing as we created before by hand, but this is a selected items. It's a collection. It's already built. We made a collection and passed it back. This one's built into the object. We'll put a next in here. Do a debug.print. X and fd selected items.count. This should just print off whatever the user has selected. Letting them select multiple things. We'll see which ones they have selected. I want to do two more things. Let's do one first. FD, there's several modifications we can make here. So I think I can change the title. What do I want to show in the title? Choose some crime files. Title equals choose crime files to process. I can change what is on the OK button. Instead of OK, I can put something else. fd.buttonname equals some string. Go back to my former roots when I used to teach at Tulane University in Louisiana. Get her done. That's okay. We want to get her done. Okay, so now when I run this, we should see these two modifications. Before we hit the show, we've said, hey, make a title, make a button name, set up it for multi-select. Let's run it and see what happens. So now there's the title. Get crime file for process. What's my button name? Hey, button name. I have to click on something before it changes it. Oh, that's because open means it's got a folder. It's expecting me to choose a folder to open. Very good. So let me get to file, go download the crime. There we go. Now I start selecting. Hold my shift key down, I can select a bunch. Control lets me select them individually. Now I can get her done. And prints this up. Oh, I'm printing the count. I don't want to print the count. I want to print the selected item sub x. One more time, really quickly, then we'll go back to the code. And here it's run through those and print off the names to those specific files. And of course, at that point, I could open them, process them, close them just the same. Okay. One last thing, and that is, I'd like to be able to control this. Look, this is a pretty lame drop-down. It's a drop-down with one choice, the one that's already selected. I'd like to be able to add some other ones in. Maybe even get rid of this all files. And so, again, that's something I'm setting up before I get here. So fd dot, what could it be? What could it be? Oh, there's a filter in filters. Fd dot filters. Now, is this an object? Is this a property that returns an object, or is this just the end? What do you think? How would you find out? Yeah, hit the dot again. Does it give you more to choose from? Oh, yeah. Oh, look. Add. I can add a filter. What does it take? First thing is a description. Excel files. It also takes an extension. This extensions as a string. This takes a specific format. So here I can say star.xls x semicolon star.xlsm. So that will say either with the semicolon says, you know what, any of these will work. That adds in that filter. I'll do another one. I want text files. Instead of Excel files, let's look just for text files. I can do star.txt, star.csv, star.tab separated variable. I don't know what kind of text file we do. It turns out that I can also tell it, and I'll now have three. I'll have all files, Excel files, and text files. Incidentally, it's really common to kind of duplicate these in here so the user can see what the filter is. The user is going to see whatever is in these quotes. So sometimes it's nice to actually put it here. This is star.txt, star.csv. This part is totally ignored by the filter itself. The filtering is done here. But sometimes it's nice to show the user what's in the filter, and so they only see whatever you have. But here I can do this. I can pick which one of these I want. fd.selected, fd.filterIndex equals 2. The first one should be all files. It's there by default. 2 should get my Excel files to be the one that's showing when it comes in. I'll run that. Now we can see my Excel files are selected here. I still have all 3. That one's selected. If I change this to text files, it shows one of my text files, of which I have none. But, oh, you know what? I was wrong. It does show the filter automatically. So yeah, don't duplicate that. That's crazy. That's crazy. So it used to be, oh, back when I first learned this, that was a long time ago. Good. I'm glad you did. Well, what if I don't want the all files in there? Well, before I start adding, I can do this. fd.filters.clear. It'll wipe out what's there, and then we'll add the other ones in. Filter index is still 2, so what's what's the active filter going to be at this point? It's going to be text files, because that will be the second one at this point. We'll run that. Text files is selected. I can change it to Excel files. Pick the ones I want, say get or done, and it'll process them. So that really is kind of the ins and outs of using the Office Dialog. We've got a little bit more introduced to manipulating our own collections of, in this case, strings, but there could be collections of other objects as well. Questions? Got an exam to take before when? When do you have to get that exam in your hand? By 3 o'clock on Saturday. Don't go at 4 o'clock, you won't be able to take it. How much will it cost you for the privilege of taking that exam on Saturday? $5. Take it Friday, free, no charge. Take it tomorrow, no charge. If you cut class, take it now. Listen to this on the video. Good. Good. Yeah. All right, folks, thanks for coming. Class dismissed.
I didn't check my email.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well,
It's unpleasant because I'll be this. Email me this with the description. Yeah, I will just try to submit. Are you ready to submit?
No, I'm not able to.
No crap.
Yeah, but I would like to. Maybe the
I'm just going to try to submit it. Submit, it'll tell us. I'll send you, you know, the feedback's there. If it doesn't, that's good news. It just works on my machine and it's submitted.